Survivor of incest and closed adoption confronts biological daughter's persistent attempts at reconnection despite repeated rejections. I don't know if this is the right place, but I've exhausted other means of support. When I was 12, I suffered a short period of horrible abuse from a distant relative, and ended up pregnant. My religious parents were adamant about choosing life, while maintaining their crystal clear image in the community, and I was sent to live with my grandmother for my 7th grade year. I ended up giving birth a few weeks after my 13th birthday, and immediately handed the child over to her adoptive parents, who at the time seemed like wonderful people. The only people who even knew of my pregnancy in my life, aside from authorities and medical personnel, were my parents, my grandmother, one of my brothers, and my therapist. My husband is also aware. I'm now 32, I have been married to the man of my dreams for 2 years and pregnant with what will be our first children together. Lucked out with twins, as we require IVF to conceive. It took me the rest of my childhood and the better part of my 20s to get over what happened to me. I finally was able to heal, put it past me, and now for the past 5 years or so I'm able to go months at a time without thinking about it. I had a closed adoption. I made it clear to the adoptive parents I wanted absolutely no contact whatsoever, and I never held the baby I gave away, something I do not regret to this day. I have avoided ever having social media, partially to avoid being found. In the beginning of September, I received a phone call from a PI letting me know my biological daughter wanted to meet me and had hired him to track me down. I immediately made it clear I have no interest in contact, and to please leave me alone. By the end of November I had received multiple phone calls and letters from my biological daughter, begging me to meet her. I wrote her a letter in return, telling her I'm happy she's had a great life, but that I have no interest in contact. I made it clear, I will not stop her at all from reaching out to extended family. I won't be mad if she outs me as her biological mother, and pursues a relationship with my relatives. She did reach out to my brother, who immediately blocked her on Facebook. I would prefer she didn't, but I don't think it's my place to keep her from doing so. On Tuesday, she showed up at my front door while I was at work. My husband answered, and immediately told her to please leave, or he would have to call the police. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to explain to her in any other way that I do not want to meet her. I also don't want to be cruel. I don't view her as my daughter, as horrible as that sounds. I do wish her the best, but I have built a life I'm finally comfortable with. I don't want her to be part of it. If there is any insight any adoptees could provide on how I could explain this to her without having to just be brutally honest and also sparing her feelings. Or birth moms, who have gone through a similar thing. Relevant comments. Comment 1, comment deleted by user OP. I ended up writing her another letter, explaining how she was conceived, how many years it took for me to finally feel like a human being again, and how my unwillingness to meet her has nothing to do with her personally, and everything to do with needing to preserve my own mental health. I asked that she please leave me and the one brother she reached out to alone. I again stressed, I would not stop her from reaching out to extended family, and I included a packet of information about our family medical history and some watercolor pictures that my grandmother and I made together when I was pregnant with her. Comment 2. Question. Did her adoptive parents know about the circumstances of her conception? OP. Her parents were made aware by my parents about details surrounding her conception before the adoption took place. Comment 3. While I don't condone her behavior, do try to understand what forces would drive someone to behave that way. What you and your husband are doing is, to put it very bluntly, a cruelty. It's understandable, but no less cruel. It makes sense that you don't view her as your daughter. But it also makes sense that she might seek to know who she is by knowing you. As an adopted kid growing up, I wondered endlessly about who I was, and I felt like the only way to get a sense of it was to track down biological relatives. Which I did do, and, funny enough, I experienced a little bit of what you described doing to her. It more or less worked out for me. She's a 19-year-old woman who just wants to know who she is. It actually may be healing for you also to erase the trauma of what you went through at 13, and giving up the child then, by replacing it with this new person, whom you may find you relate to as a peer, rather than your child. You may see her more as a younger sister, and that may actually be a great relationship for the two of you. The best situation I could see happening would be for you to welcome her interest, and accept her as a legitimate part of your life and family, for you and your husband to get over your resistance to the fact that she exists. I know my own birth mother's husband had to deal with this to a degree. Resisting her will actually just make things more unpleasant and have them linger, like the second shoe that never drops. While dropping the resistance may be the most peaceful path to her leaving on her own, or better yet, co-creating the kind of relationship that works for everyone involved. Obviously, As an adopted kid, I'm going to advocate for other adopted kids getting whatever they can to gain some closure about their own adoption experience. Adoption is, itself, traumatic. And it echoes throughout life. I think it would do both of you a world of good to hop on a phone together and for you to explain what your resistance is about. OP. Nothing will erase the trauma I went through at 12 and 13 years old. In the span of a little over a year, I went from a little girl who still played with Barbies, to being forced to go through the extremely traumatic birth of an unwanted child. She is welcome to be a part of the lives and family of my extended family. Someday when my own children are grown, they are free to know and love her. For my own life, I choose not to have her as part of it. As painful as it is, she is a physical reminder of the worst events that have ever happened to myself and my brother. Telling me it may be healing for me or erase my abuse, to get to know her is, in a way, condescending. At no point did I attempt to make a claim that I know her trauma, nor will I ever trivialize it. I will never know the loss she feels, or the pain and unique trauma that comes along with being an adoptee. I won't claim to know what's best for her to heal, or any other person. I wish her nothing but the best, but I won't be hopping on the phone with her anytime soon. I won't pretend to know your trauma, don't pretend to know mine. I wish you and your family happiness and health. Adoption is challenging, and it seems often tragic for many parties involved. Comment 3. Threatening to have your daughter arrested because she wants to meet you seems a bit excessive. OP, a woman who is a stranger to my husband, showed up at our front door, demanding to see his wife, me, in the middle of a pandemic, while I am 26 weeks pregnant with our first children. She was shouting demanding to see me, and he calmly told her to leave or he would get the police involved. I don't think he acted out of line, or in excess. Comment 4. You didn't say that in your original post. All you wrote was, on Tuesday, she showed up at my front door while I was at work. My husband answered, and immediately told her to please leave or he would have to call the police. OP, at the time, it didn't seem necessary to say. She, a stranger, that I expressed I did not want any contact with, presumably drove across state lines to come to my home, while I am knowingly pregnant during a pandemic to see me. I am sympathetic to everything she's going through, but it was extremely unsettling for my husband, and I don't blame him at all. He's understandably protective of me. Comment 5. It's unsettling to see so many people refer to this 19-year-old girl as some malicious woman, including OP. She's a child and she is acting like one. OP. At no point did I make her out to be a malicious woman. She is definitely young, and I understand that that is part of where her lack of impulse control comes from. I have given her as much of an explanation as I'm willing to. I hope that she finds peace and closure in whatever it is she is looking for. Now that I have made her aware of the details surrounding her conception, I hope she can understand better why I make the choices I am making. I am someone who places a lot of value in having my space and boundaries respected. I don't feel I owe her anything. I was a child myself when she was born, and we are both victims of the same man who forced us into this situation. I do not view her as my daughter, and I do not view myself as her mother. I think we are two people biologically tied as parent and offspring, and tied by a series of extremely traumatic events that we had no choices in. I did not feel familial kinship for her while I was forced to keep an unwanted pregnancy, and I did not feel familial kinship for her when I was forced through a traumatic birth, and to be brutally honest, I do not feel familial kinship towards her now. I wish her well, and I hope she finds peace, but I do not feel in any way a parent to her. I don't know her trauma and will never know her trauma, in the same ways that she will never know mine. I don't think she has malicious intent. Comment 6. Yes, you did. But when confronted about that, several times, simply deny the misconstruction of the poor girl. OP. I have empathy for her, to a point. We all have the right to our boundaries being respected. Update, TLDR. When I was 13, I gave birth after being forced to go through a pregnancy that resulted from incest rape. The child was adopted through a closed adoption. After she initiated contact, sought a reunion, I declined wanting contact, and she has now shown up at my home twice. I reluctantly agreed to a phone call with said young woman today, and I know without a doubt that she is entirely unwelcome in my life. As stated in responses to comments in my original posts, I ended up writing my birth daughter another letter explaining to her the circumstances of her birth and why I do not want contact with her. I also included a few watercolors I did with my grandmother while I was pregnant with her, and an extensive packet of information regarding family medical history. I overnight FedExed it to the address I had for her. Sadly, in the late hours of last night, she showed up at my house again, this time while I was home, and pounded on my front door, screaming. My husband and I tried to ignore it, but we got a phone call from our neighbors that they would call the police if we didn't answer our door to handle the situation, and I honestly didn't want to start Christmas Eve with getting someone clearly going through the thick of it arrested. My husband spoke to her via our home doorbell alarm system thing. When this did not placate her, I literally barricaded myself in our bathroom, and he went out the back door, locking it, and then around the front to speak to her. I could hear him screaming at her, unpleasant, but apparently effective, because she finally left. This morning, I received a phone call from her adoptive parents apologizing to me, that they never fully disclosed how she was conceived, and that they helped fund the PI, which is how she found me, hoping it would lead to a more happy reunion. What they did tell me, they told her, that she was the result of rape. What they lied to her about was that it was my parents who made me give her away, and that I always loved her, chose life and wanted to keep her if I'd been older. All lies, and it seems she received a similar very religious upbringing that I did. I ended up agreeing to speak with her on the phone, facilitated by her birth parents, if she understood that now she has to leave me alone, or I will pursue legal advice, and will not hesitate to call the police if she were to ever come to my home ever again. I was very blunt with her, because I felt that she's already been lied to 100 times. It probably would have been better to do the conversation through a therapist, but honestly I'm just happy it's over. She asked me if I loved her as her daughter, the way I love the children I'm pregnant with. I told I have love for her as a human being, but that I would not lie and say I felt like a mother to her. That she's only 5 years younger than my own husband, and that I don't love her in any maternal way, but I do love her as my sister in humanity. She asked me if I wish I had an abortion. I said that at the time, I wanted an abortion. That the trauma I felt would have been significantly reduced if I were allowed to terminate the pregnancy forced upon me by my rapist. I also said I wouldn't go back and change what happened now, because she already exists, and I would never wish away her existence. She asked me about my faith and if I am still a very conservative religious background, that I guess she shares. I told her no, that I am not even a Christian. She asked me about my political beliefs and if I support murdering babies. I said I'm 100% pro-choice, that I'm a socialist and an anti-capitalist, but that I don't think being conservative makes you a bad person. Not really related, but I felt the need to say it. We talked about other things for a bit, mostly her asking me, because if I'm being honest, I don't really care to ask her anything about herself. She asked me if I forgave her birth father, and if I ever spoke to him. And if I would ever consider visiting him with her. I told her that I will never forgive him. That I don't ascribe to Christian ideas of having to forgive. When pressed further about information related to him, I told her to ask my parents for any further information, and take the time to read the second letter I wrote her. I provided her mother with contact information for my own parents. I'm hoping to close this chapter of my life. I can't imagine speaking with me gave her much peace, but I hope she's satisfied. My husband and I are now considering moving so that she can't find us again. I don't feel any better having spoken with her. If anything, I'm reassured about choosing never to see her in person. She seems like a broken person, and I hope she finds her own healing, but I do not want her as part of my life. She seems like the kind of person I wouldn't get along with, and would never respect boundaries. I get that she has so much trauma of her own, and I hope she is able to leave the religious community she belongs to, unless she's happy there. I don't feel guilty that her life wasn't everything it could have been. I do feel sympathy that she obviously has been raised in a similar toxic religious household. I am glad this is over. I've disconnected my landline, and am changing my cell phone number. I am going to restart therapy at the beginning of next year, and if she ever shows up at my home again I will be calling the police. Relevant comments. Comment 1. You did everything possible to help her while still keeping that boundary clear. I applaud you for that. I know this was very distributive to your life and she had no right to it and obviously crossed the line multiple times. It makes a lot more sense now hearing about the involvement of the adoptive parents and how they have hurt the situation. They should have never ever told her those things, never crossed a line with the PI, and never encouraged her to keep pursuing this. It was completely inappropriate and entirely their fault. Honestly, the girl is just acting in the way you would expect for her age and upbringing in the context of what she had been told. I'm sure that as she gets older she will think back to this and possibly read through everything you gave her multiple times. She will be able to process it and most likely be able to understand where you're coming from. She will appreciate the information and the honesty at some point. She is just a child and everything that she had ever thought about the situation and the possibilities of a relationship is completely wrong. That's a lot to stomach for anyone, let alone a kid. Try not to be angry with her about this. If anything, be angry at those parents. They are the ones responsible for putting her on this mission. OP. I'm not angry with her, I don't hate her. She's obviously a scared teenager in need of guidance, and I hope she finds the answers she is looking for. Comment 2. Is her birth father in prison? Did he ever get any kind of punishment? Also, I'm so sorry for everything that has happened. Being pregnant after a forced pregnancy is so hard. I was also pregnant after I was raped, and now that I'm pregnant again, I've noticed things being weird in my head. OP, he spent 16 years in prison. He raped 6 members of my family in 1 year, including myself. Being pregnant after having been pregnant from abuse is strange for sure. My pregnancy is nearly 2 decades apart, but it has brought back weird feelings. I literally chose this pregnancy. My husband and I used IVF, and sometimes I have to double think first thing in the morning of horror at the reaction of my baby bump. Comment 3. Comment removed by moderator. OP, I am now living in a hotel rather than staying in my house while I'm pregnant to avoid having to call the police on her. You're right in that, I don't know her. I don't feel overwhelming and hopefully warm love for her like a mother would, but I care about her as a person. I care for her in that I believe she deserves the very best life and answers to her questions, and emotional support. I just can't be the one to provide it. I am barely holding it together. I've done what I thought showed her respect while respecting myself. You have no right at all to ascribe intentions or feelings towards my actions. Comment 4. The adoptive parents completely disregarded their promise made when adopting her, to keep her safe. Nothing they told her kept her emotionally safe, and even put her in potential physical danger by encouraging and facilitating the hiring of a PI, which is what led to these late-night door poundings and overly emotional decision-making. I'm so angry at them for OP and for her. OP, they were unfair to her, and I'm angry with them for this reason, and not her. I'm so pissed they lied to her. I'm also a bit angry with my own parents, because at the time of the adoption I was told her parents were non-denominational Christians and not part of my parents' insane sect of Christianity. Comment 5. Wow, it just keeps getting worse. I'm really sorry. I'd be extremely angry with the adoptive parents as well. I might be more inclined to give my parents the benefit of the doubt and ask if they'd been lied to, as well, since the adoptive parents are obviously extremely dishonest, willing to tell reprehensible lies to their own child to avoid a difficult conversation. You mentioned that your parents have grown and changed immensely since this all happened. Would you be able to discuss this with them to get some answers and work towards closure, perhaps once you're back in therapy and have guidance? OP, I genuinely thought her parents were good people, all my life, or at least all her life. It never crossed my mind, they weren't. I would have fought harder for a better set of people had I known they were the same type of Christians as my parents. I'm definitely going to be speaking with my parents about this, with the facilitation of a mental health professional, when given the chance. Honestly, my parents were such jerks and liars when I was a kid, they genuinely may not remember telling this specific lie. They are pretty awesome people now, and have spent like 15 years working so hard to change. I obviously don't excuse their behavior ever, but I do think they will be open to talk about this, and admit their part. If you're talking about speaking with her parents, I really don't think that's going to happen. Comment 6. I just asked this some seconds ago. The parents who allowed to be raped and rug-swept it, are more deserving of empathy, consideration than the poor girl, innocent in all that mess. Come on. OP, I know my parents. They raised me. They are far, far, far from perfect. I don't see them all the time, but I have an established relationship with them that spans 32 years. My biological child is a stranger to me. I don't know her, I don't know her intentions. I haven't spent 100s of hours in therapy with her, over nearly 2 decades, picking apart and rebuilding our relationship. She's now come to my home uninvited, 3 times, after I've asked her multiple times to leave me alone. She's stalked me at this point, and I've done nothing but try to be sympathetic to her. My parents aren't perfect people, but they've spent over a decade fundamentally reassessing who they are, what they believe, and the role they played in the traumatic childhood of my brother and I. They respect every boundary I ask of them nowadays. They know the part they played and own up to how fucked if they were when I was a kid, and they are amazing parents to much, much, much younger brother than they ever were to my brother and I. My relationship with my own parents isn't up for debate here. OP, just to make it clear, my parents absolutely never allowed myself or my brother to be raped. OP, I never said they were more deserving of empathy than her. I don't think they are. Additionally, my parents, again, far from perfect, but did support my brother, myself, my maternal cousins, and my paternal aunt emotionally when we testified against our rapist. Comment 7. Comment deleted by user OP, I disagree. I was a child when I had her against my will. I begged my parents and then my grandmother to please not force me to give birth. I don't know what more could be asked of me. I made it clear I did not want contact with her. She pushed for contact, and I gave it to her. I'm not going to lie to her. Her adoptive parents have already done enough of that. I hope she heals. I hope she has a great life, I just don't want any part of it. Honestly, I hope she has a great relationship with her biological grandparents, my own parents, if that's what she wants. I hope she meets them, and I hope they give her the biological connection she craves. They are entirely different people from when I was young, and I can honestly say they are good people now. I would not classify them as good parents when I was growing up, but decades and a lot of therapy can change things. I hope she finds joy, I hope she finds peace.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.